Alright, today I'm going to be doing a remote start with keyless entry install on a 2012 Scion TC. Going to be using a Viper 4806V and a directed DBALL2 bypass module. Pretty lengthy process, so I'll try to show as many of the steps as I can. Right now I'm getting ready to prep it on the bench slash my counter, so yeah. Okay, so the first thing that I did here was I plugged in all the harnesses into the remote start and I clipped off the wires that I don't need. So I'm going to show you what's left on the ones that I did use. I used them all except for the pink black one here on the main harness. And then I got the red here, the black here, the brown here, and the white here are left on the 6-pin harness here. Moving over, this one's a neutral safety switch, like toggle switch here, so I'll leave that just plugged in. The next one is the lock harness, so we leave that connected. And then here on this big 24-pin one, we have left the black-white, the brown, the violet-white, the gray, and the violet-yellow as well. So those are the wires that we're going to be working with here, and I'm going to show you what we do here next. I'm going to do the same thing on the bypass module as well, cut off what I don't need, and then from there start connecting what needs to be connected to each other. Okay, for the DBL here, I'm going to go right down the line. On the blue harness here, the tan black and the tan we're using, the orange red and the yellow red we're using, and the red and black we're also using. The other ones cut off, tape them off. And the red harness here, we're going to be using the gray, orange black, yellow black, violet white. Everything else cut, tape off the ends. Flip it around to the other side here, the black harness, we're going to be using the blue and the green. We're going to be using the blue white and also the pink. So any other wires besides those, cut off, tape them off for this application. Different cars obviously will vary, but this is for this particular car. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to be doing is getting the power situation sorted. The Viper here has 3 wires here that need to go to constant 12 volts. There's only one constant 12 volt wire in the car in the harness area, so we're just going to combine these 3 wires here. Basically what I do is I strip the insulation off, poke a hole in it, open it up, then strip away the wire here on this one, and then you just kind of put it through the hole there, wrap it, and then solder it. See, like that. Trying to do it one-handed here. So yeah, you wrap it like that, then you go ahead and take your soldering iron, soldering gun, whatever, solder the wire here. So combining those 3 here, I'm also going to put this red wire here, it's also going to go to 12 volts, so I'll be doing that also. And the red one over here off of the DBL is also going to be going to 12 volts. So I'm going to start with getting all my 12 volts one situated, and then keep moving on from there. Okay, so now I've got all the powers connected to power wire, main power wire here, the constant 12 volts. Got the one coming off the DBL, the red one coming off the 6-pin harness here, red as well, and then these 3 all together. So that's going to be 12 volts, so I got that part done. Next I'm going to be doing the ones that need to be grounded. So this is the main ground wire here on the 6-pin harness, the pin number 2, thick black one. So this black-white one here is the neutral safety slash parking brake one, which this car's an automatic, so we won't be using it for that purpose, so it's just going to be get grounded. So that one's going to go to here, as well as the black ground wire off the DBL is going to go to here as well. That way there's minimal connections that we do in the car. We're kind of prepping everything from there to here that are going to be going together and going to the same place, so yeah. Okay, so now that I've got the power and ground situated, we're moving on to the next wire. So I'm basically going to be connecting what needs to go from the DBL over to the Viper here, because they're kind of going to talk to each other. There's going to be some data and CAN connections in there that this reads off of the car, and then from that translates it to here, and vice versa. I mean, it's going to be really this thing telling it here, and from here going back out. So it's kind of confusing, but I mean, following the instructions, it's pretty straightforward. Now there's actually going to be minimal connections needed in the actual car. There's not going to be a whole lot actually. Most of it's done in the prep work here. So there can be maybe like 8-10 wires or something to connect in the car. So this is a lot better in some ways than older ones where you got to do every single connection in the car. Okay, so right here on the big 24-pin harness, the violet white to violet white off of the red one here. And off of the 24 pin again, the solid brown wire here, which is the brake shutdown, it's going to be going to the gray one here on the red plug here on the DBALL2. So this is for the tach wire that's basically reads that the engine's running, the tach RPM. And then the other one here is brake shutdown. That'll be for when you get in the car, turn the key, press the brake, the remote start shuts down. So those are two pretty needed connections here. And then that's the only ones that are going to connect from there to here on this red harness here. These other two will go to the car. Same thing over here on the blue one. These other ones here are going to be going to the car. So we're not doing anything with those at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and solder these two up and move on to the other side. Okay, so moving along, finished up with the red and blue plugs here. Off of the black plug here on the other side of the DBALL2, we've got a blue-white, and that's going over to the solid blue off of the 24 pin on the Viper. And then we've got the green and blue going to the green and blue off of the Viper, but they're off this 2-pin harness. Those are the locks. So these are the lock wires, lock and unlock. This one is ground when running, which triggers the DBALL, the remote start here, and will trigger the DBALL when you go to start it, and sends a negative signal to here and lets it power up, do its thing, talk to the car, tell it to start. So, yep, so I'm going to go ahead and solder those and then move on to the next wires. Alright, and then the last wire here off of the DBALL that we're connecting to the Viper is the pink wire here, and that's ignition input. And since we're going to have ignition right here, eventually this one's going to be connected to the car's ignition wire. We soldered it in right here, and then just going to tape it up there. Then I'm going to clean this up a little and make it a little bit more presentable and kind of wrap it all together. And you'll see, I'll show you what wires are left over and then how we're going to connect them to the car. Alright, so one connection I forgot to, I guess I didn't see it at the beginning, is there's going to be a relay for a second starter in this vehicle. Since there's not enough outputs for a second starter, there's 2 ignition outputs, 1 starter one, and then the accessory as well. We need to wire up a second starter. So for this, we get a single pole double throw relay. This is the DI one that I use. Basically 86 and 87 are going to go to 12 volts. 85 is going to be going to the purple yellow wire. That's the negative starter output. And then from there, we're going to connect 30 off of the relay to the second starter wire in the vehicle. So once again, the 87, 86, 12 volts, so I'm going to be connecting those right here. 85 is going to be going to the purple yellow negative starter output. That's going to trigger it. And then the output is going to be the 30, which is going to go to the vehicle. So I think I'm going to see what kind of scrap wire I got sitting around, see if I can get another one that's purple, since that's the direct electronics color for starter wires. So yeah, but I'm going to go ahead and wire that up, and then I got this mostly cleaned up, but once I get that in, then it'll cleaned up even better, and I'll just have just the wires that I need exposed. Alright, so here I've got it cleaned up a bit. What we got left here are our main ignition wires. So these will go to the ignition switch. We've got parking lights, ground, horn output. I'm not actually sure if I'm going to use that or not. Sometimes it's kind of annoying to have the horn honk all the time. Also, we got the gray wire here, which is the hood pin switch. So that one's also it. That's all we have left off of the remote start to connect. And over here we've got a couple other wires. We've got can high, can low, data wire that goes to the OBD2 port. I think 3 of these go to the OBD2 port. 2 of them are for our auto headlight interrupt, which I don't believe this car has, so we probably won't be using them. And yeah, that's basically it. So yeah, we've got, I don't know, maybe a little more than 10 wires left to connect in the vehicle. So I go to the vehicle now, take it apart, and then show you a step-by-step from there. Okay, so I'm in the vehicle. I got it all apart right now. Don't have any wires connected yet, but I do have the bottom shroud here off. It just unclips. You got to be very careful because they're pretty tight. Gotta do a little bit of finagling for that. So it just pops off and then it slid it right out. I had to mess with this a little bit to get it out, but it came out. Also had to take off the kick panel and the side panel here. It kind of all came off together. That was just clips as well, so no tools needed so far for the disassembly. Alright, so now that I have it apart, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of get the unit in place and then start routing the wires towards the areas they're going to be. I'm not connecting them just yet, but I'm kind of, you know, mapping out where everything's going to be so things aren't just flopping all over the place. Keep things looking clean. Basically, it's a good mess right now, but that's just because all the wires are off. Nothing's managed that well right now, so basically it's going to be going up in the plenty of room way up there. So that's where the remote start's going to be going. I'm just kind of setting it near there right now. It's not going to be in place yet because I got to get all my connections in place and then get the programming done as well. And the first thing I did is I got the main ignition wiring running up here to this guy here, or in this area. This is the main ignition wires. They're going to be connecting up here to the ignition switch plug, which is this guy here. So yeah, those are going to be going there. Got my white wire here, which is my parking lights, which is going to end up going up here to this guy, which is the parking light switch harness here. So yeah, kind of gives you an idea where I'm starting. I'm going to start with the ignition wires, then from there I'm going to connect that one, then move down. So I always like to start here. You don't have to, but just where I'm going if you want to follow along. Alright, so if you follow along with the manual here, I'll have a link to that in the description. How to do it here. Here's the ignition connector here. Shows the pin out and everything. Also shows right here what wire is which. Obviously this is pretty reliable. I'm still going to test the wires nonetheless. I've been burned by this before, so I can't stress it enough. Test your wires with a multimeter. Even something cheap little guy like this will work. This is like $5 at Harbor Freight. I think sometimes they even give them away for free if you're one of the members or whatever. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start with a constant 12 volts, which should be this fat white wire here. Most Toyotas, Lexuses, etc., they're going to be that, but I'm going to test it with a multimeter first. So my red lead here on the multimeter, I'm going to connect, I'm going to back probe it there. Alright, and then my negative, I'm going to connect a known ground, which is right there. Boom. So 12 volts, 12.4, 12.6. This should be ideal. I got the windows open, dome lights on, so, or the doors open, the dome lights on. So yeah, here's the setting that I've got the multimeter on. So 12 volts right there. So that's my 12 volts. That's what I'm going to connect my main red wire here off of the remote start, which has all the other ones tying into it as well. Alright, the next wire I'm going to is thick gauge green wire there, and that's going to be my starter wire, so I'm going to go ahead and test that right now. I've got it back probed with the multimeter, got a multimeter reference ground there. I'm going to turn the key to the start position, and you should see it blip 12 volts. It's kind of hard to see it sometimes, but yeah. See? So there we go. That's my 12 volts, and it just, if you wanted to be 100% for sure, you could put the thing in like drive and then turn it on, or turn the key. The wire should still get 12 volts. Obviously the car won't start then, but you'll have a good idea that's the right wire. Alright, so my next wire is going to be the thick gray wire here. I've got it set up here for testing. Now this is an ignition wire, so this should get 12 volts while cranking, while the key on, etc. So this is, here it goes. Keys on. Stays up while cranking. It'll drop down a little bit just because obviously there's a giant draw from the starter going, but if it was an accessory wire drops out during crank. So once we get to the accessory wire, I'll show you how that goes. And yeah, so this pink wire is going to go to the gray wire there, the thick gray wire. And in case you missed it earlier, the purple wire goes to the green here, red wire goes to the thick white, and now the pink one is going to be going to our thick gray one here. Alright, so the next wire I'm going to be testing is the tan wire here, all the way on the top right. It's a thin little guy. This is going to be our starter 2 wire. And so, once again, I've got it back probed there. This should get 12 volts while the vehicle is cranking. It's going to be real quick, so it's hard to see it, but you will see it. There you go. multimeter is a cheapo, so it takes a little bit to register, but you saw it there. So for that one, the wire color that I use is the pink black, one of the wires that I cut off earlier, because it was actually the number 30 coming off of the single pole double throw DI relay that I wired up for the second starter. So this color can vary for what you're going to be doing. So keep in mind, this can be whatever, because this isn't off of the remote start, this is off the relay that I wired up. So yeah, this is the one I'm going to it, but your color may differ depending on what color wiring you chose to use for that relay. Alright, so next wire here is the thin gray up in the top left corner here. And that's going to be ignition 2. So this will be 12 volts with the key on and during cranking. There we go. So that is going to be our ignition 2 for that one. We're connecting the pink-white wire right up to it. Alright, and the final wire in our ignition switch plug is going to be the black wire here, which should be our accessory wire. An accessory wire will get power with the key on, but will cut out during cranking. So here we go. I'm going to turn the key on. Sorry, I don't have it back prone very well. Alright, let me try to get that in there better. Alright, so let's start over. Alright, the key is into the on position. Alright, and I'm going to turn the key to crank. Cuts out, comes back. So that's the accessory wire. So I'm going to connect our remaining orange wire here right up to that guy. Alright, so I'm done in the ignition harness. So I'm just going to go ahead and recap the colors here. Orange accessory wire goes to the black. Second accessory, the pink white, goes to the thin gray. Starter 1 goes to the thick green. Constant 12 volts goes to the white, and that's the red wire here, and then the starter was the purple one there. Ignition wire, which is the pink, goes to the thick gauge gray. And then finally our second starter, which can vary on color that you use. I ended up changing it over to purple just to go with the theme of purple starter wire. So that's going to be going to this tan wire here, the very thin tan wire. So those are your ignition wires. Obviously you're going to want to solder these. Don't use scotch locks, T-taps, any of that crap. You do what I did there. Strip away the insulation, poke a hole, wrap it around, and then solder it. I can't stress it enough. Solder your wires. Do not use those crappy type of connectors. I've seen so many bad things happen from those.